Is it avoidant attachment or are they just unavailable? If you've ever wondered whether someone is an avoidant or if they're just unavailable, this video is going to help you to tell the difference. Because some people are not avoidants. Some people are just simply unavailable. And when you're anxious yourself, it's really easy to confuse the two because, well, they tend to look like a lot of distance. And distance is something that you already think you can fix because you're a really good fixer, right? So you naturally assume the role of fixer. You slip into that role very easily in most of your adult relationships. And so you try to bridge the gap, that emotional space that the unavailable person or the avoidant is creating because somewhere deep inside of you, you think that bridging that distance is the solution. You think that that's how you're going to squeeze love out of this relationship and get what you want out of it. But here's what I want to say to you. Avoidant attachment, it explains certain behavioral patterns for sure, because it is a style of relating. And I think it's a really important point here to make before we even start this conversation about relational styles like anxious attachment or avoidant, because before we even get into this conversation on this channel, it's important to know that these are just relational patterns. They are the way that some people learn to stay safe in relationships. Unavailability is something else entirely. Unavailability is not a relational style at all. What it is simply a wall. It's a boundary that someone puts up when they're not willing or when they're not interested in creating more emotional intimacy and closeness with somebody else. And if someone does this, it doesn't mean that you now need to work harder to bridge that gap, especially not with someone who's already showing you that they're unavailable. Hi, I'm Madalena, and this is You Reclaimed. Around here, we talk a lot about how our old trauma patterns show up in our adult lives and how anxiety and emotional dysregulation in general, how all of that plays out in our adult relationships. And we do this because, well, we want to do better and we want to feel like our lives are under our own control. So today I want to talk to you about avoidant versus unavailable. What's the difference between the two? Wait, did you subscribe yet? I have a lot more to share and I'd love to have you here for it. It really helps my channel grow and I appreciate it so much. I want to start with this. Your style of relating, it's a pattern. It's something that you picked up a long time ago, probably in your childhood. It goes as far back as our early relationships with our parents and with our caregivers. That's where a lot of this begins. And if you had really good relationships with your early caregivers, if those relationships were mostly stable and supportive and they were emotionally consistent, then you probably became securely attached. And that means that most of the time you feel safe in a romantic relationship. You're not overthinking everything. You can ask for what you need easily as you realize your needs. You feel okay being close to somebody else, but you also feel okay being on your own and spending time by yourself. It doesn't make you feel anxious to do so. But if that's not the kind of upbringing you had, if your childhood included emotional instability of some sort, or a chaotic emotional environment, or even neglect or some sort of trauma, then chances are that you came out of that environment with one of the insecure attachment styles. And those are anxious, avoidant, or anxious disorganized, which most of us now recognize, right? Because we talk about them so much. The important thing to understand out of this first part is that your attachment style is not your identity. It's not who you are as a human being. It's helpful to know which one of these attachment patterns you tend to lean toward. And it's helpful to recognize the behavior that shows up in your close relationships at any given time because, well, it can change depending on who you relate to. But when the behavior has a name, then you can try to work with it, right? So it helps you do better in relationships. You can learn more about it and you can start to shift it in that way. What's not helpful is to put yourself in a box. It's not actually helpful to label yourself in such a rigid way that you can't allow yourself any movement, that you can't allow yourself to grow or to change in any way, right? Or to relate in a different way depending on who you're with, because not every person will trigger the same things in you. You might feel more anxious in one relationship and more secure in another relationship. For example, In my young adult life, I started out as anxious, disorganized by design, right? From my own upbringing, which was quite rough emotionally. Not so much these days, but that's how I started out. So in my younger days, if I was connecting with someone who's mostly a hard avoidant, who has a lot of traits of an avoidant, who displays a lot of the behavioral patterns of an avoidant, then that was an ongoing poop show between us, right? It would really trigger me, right? It would light up all of my old patterns and it would make me feel more emotionally volatile. It made everything seem harder than it had to. It would require a lot more emotional effort from me. If, on the other hand, I related to someone who was securely attached, my nervous system would quiet down. I could relax. I could be myself. The anxiety just quieted down. So just because you tend to act in a certain way in a relationship, it doesn't mean that your pattern is set in stone. It is not. You can grow and shift these patterns, and you can learn a new way of relating. If you download the attachment quiz linked below in the description for this video, you can at least find out what you start out as, what you tend to lean towards, and then you can start shifting that towards secure attachment if you're not already there. But let's get back to the core of this conversation. Avoidant attachment is a relational pattern. Unavailability is a choice. That's it. That's the hard difference between the two. Let's break that down further. Avoidance is rooted in what feels safe and soothing to your nervous system. So what makes you feel safe in a relationship? What makes you feel safe in relating to another human being without your anxiety constantly being triggered? Because it is triggered by anxiety, your relational pattern. It's triggered by needs that you have around closeness and connection. It's triggered by you feeling like things are a little bit out of your control, right? That's when the bulk of your negative relational patterns come up. So what do you do as an avoidant when you do want connection with another person? Because you do want connection as an avoidant. You want to be close to other people. You want to be with other people intimately, right? In a relationship. But once you get that closeness that comes with emotional intimacy, it quickly starts to feel like it's too much. It gets overwhelming very quickly for you, not because you're not interested in being with the other person. That's a hard distinction, right, with unavailability. Not because you don't care about this person, but because you can only take so much closeness at one time. Here are some of the common signs that you have mostly avoidant traits. You need space to process emotional conflict. You have a hard time with emotional conversations, especially when you feel like you're being asked to be vulnerable. You might even feel uncomfortable when someone else opens up to you emotionally because there's an unspoken pressure there, right? That you also have to participate and show emotional vulnerability in these kinds of moments, that you're expected to do the same, to participate in the same way. And that pressure is a lot for you. And so it makes you pull away. You might also feel overwhelmed by emotional intensity. So you're much more comfortable with someone who's cooler and more emotionally even because it doesn't ask as much of you. It's much easier for you to relate to someone who's cooler emotionally, who doesn't have as many like highs and lows and is too emotionally expressive. That feels a lot more destabilizing to you. And you're often disconnected from your own emotional needs. So even if someone were to ask you what you need in a relationship, it's quite hard for you to pin it down. It might feel vague, like you don't really know what you need. And the anxiously attached person, they usually have a similar problem. They're also not sure what they need a lot of the time, but they go in the other direction in trying to cope with the anxieties that they have in relating to other people. The key thing to remember is this: you do want closeness and you are looking for connection. And when you like someone, you like them. You want to be with them, but the sustained and consistent intimacy, that much closeness over time, that's what triggers your nervous system. That's what feels threatening to you. It feels threatening to your personal freedom, to your autonomy, to your individuality, and to your general sense of control in your own life because you're used to doing things on your own. And your tendency is to overcompensate by being hyper independent and exercising your personal freedom as much as you can. So being avoidant, it doesn't mean that you don't want a relationship. It just means that consistent closeness is hard for you to tolerate. You might notice avoidant traits in your partner in some of the little things. Maybe they go quiet after you have an amazing weekend together and you don't hear from them for a few days. Or maybe every time the relationship starts to deepen emotionally or it gets to a new level of emotional depth, they pull back. They cancel plans. They might seem a little bit more distant. Or they tell you that they need a little bit of space. They might not say anything cruel. They might even be kind and warm when they return. But that back and forth sort of rhythm where closeness always seems to trigger some kind of distancing, that's avoidant attachment at work. That doesn't mean that your avoidant partner takes off for 3 days and then pretends like it never happened and doesn't come back to try to continue the relationship. That's not being avoidant. That's just being uninterested. Avoidance is not personal. It's not about you not being enough. It's about them reaching their threshold of intimacy and needing to regulate by pulling back and pulling away. And the more avoidant a person is, the more avoidant traits they display, the harder this pattern is to interrupt. But if your partner is self-aware and they're willing to work on it, some avoidantly attached people can learn to stay connected on a regular basis more consistently. All of us can change these patterns, even when closeness starts to feel scary and threatening to them. If you tend to lean anxious, you probably feel these patterns a lot more intensely. So you automatically notice very quickly when someone pulls away and you feel that disconnection in your body. And your instinct might be to chase it or to try to fix it in some way or to figure out what's going on with the other person. But I want to remind you that the avoidant behavior is not always about you. In fact, it's not usually about you. And your sensitivity to it is not a flaw in yourself. It's simply a signal. Also, as an anxiously attached person, you deserve connection that feels safe and mutual, where you don't have to keep proving that you're worth staying close to. So even when you are connecting with an avoidant, it's really, really important to note that your tolerance for being in an intimate relationship with an avoidant, it has a limit, and you don't have to cross that limit. Just because someone is an avoidant and you're anxiously attached, it doesn't mean that you have to help them and continue relating to them if it makes you unhappy. In the next video, we're going to talk about unavailability, how it's different, what it looks like in real life, and why it's not something that you can fix just by loving this person harder. If this video helps you see your own patterns a little bit more clearly, or it helps you to see your partner's pattern, or it gives you a bit of relief about someone in your life, I'd love to hear about it. I want to hear your story. And if you do enjoy this kind of content, hit like and consider subscribing so that we can keep doing this together. Until next time.